Hello everyone, Minijoda here. Today I'm bringing you some League of Legends content in the form of tips and tricks for using Nami the Tidecaller. Nami is a ranged support champion that specializes on crowd control, buffing your allies and a little bit of sustain in lane. Let's go over her abilities briefly. We'll start with her passive Surging Tides. If any of your abilities hits an ally or passes through them, they receive added movement speed for a short duration. It's great for moving across the map as well as buffing your allies during a team fight. We have our Q ability, Aqua Prison. This is a skill shot bubble that you shoot in an area. If an enemy is standing in that area, it deals magic damage and stuns the enemy for a short duration. It's difficult to land, but if you do, it's extremely rewarding. Then we have her W ability, Ebb and Flow. It bounces, alternating between enemy and ally champions within range up to 3 times. Allies are healed and enemies receive magic damage. It's great as a poke ability and for decent sustain while in lane. Also her E ability, Tidecaller's Blessing. It buffs an ally champion, adding magic damage and slowing the enemy for the next 3 auto attacks, similar to how a red buff works. Finally, we have her ultimate, Tidal Wave. It shoots in a line and does magic damage, knocks up and slows every enemy it hits. It has a ridiculous range, but it travels very slowly, so it's easy to avoid if the enemies can see it coming. For runes, I use Armor Marks, Armor Seals, Mana Regen Glyphs, and Gold per 10 Quintessences. I personally prefer Mana Regen since it lets me play a little bit more aggressive in lane. I also have an additional rune page with Magic Resist Glyphs, mostly for tough matchups or if I expect to take heavy magic damage in lane, mostly for any of your counters. For Masteries, I go with a standard 1-13-16 page for supports. You can put some extra points in utility for a more passive laning phase if you'd like, but this is not ideal since the current meta is all about early aggression and heavy damage during the laning phase. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to some gameplay. Nami happens to be a strong aggressive support champion that mostly relies on kiting and proper positioning, similar to how an AD carry works. However, she does have some tough matchups in lane. In this particular game, you see me having a difficult lane for Nami because of the champions that I'm facing against. In this case, we have an Ezreal and Leona. Speaking of which, Nami does happen to be very susceptible to burst damage, as she has no gap closer or escapability of her own other than flash, which is why you should always take it as a summoner spell. As an example, in here you see that I'm completely unaware of their jungler Zeke, who seems to be heading down to our lane to gank from up top. Because I don't see him and also because of my positioning in the wrong spot, Leona manages to stun me and burst me down. And I almost grant them a kill if it weren't for flash, of course. Ideally, you don't want to be put into a situation in which you have to waste a summoner spell either in order to not get killed, so that's not good either. They do have enough CC and burst damage to kill me, but fortunately I do manage to escape without dying. A few seconds later, however, Zeke tries to get first blood by jumping at us under the turret, but we manage to turn things around thanks to Nami's abilities. A heal, burst, and a stun is too much for Zeke to handle. I guess while we're on this subject, let's go over summoner spells. I personally prefer to take Flash and Exhaust, as you can see here. I feel like these spells really complement Nami since her kit revolves mostly around kiting and keeping your distance. This is particularly important if the enemy happens to have any champions that have a gap closer and can jump to you or your carry. Exhaust can really save your life in those situations. Heal or Ignite are also good options if you feel your team is going to need them, but I personally prefer having Exhaust. Flash is an absolute must, however, so make sure you take it every game. In terms of abilities, you want to make sure you have all 3 of your abilities by level 3, mostly focusing on maxing your W, Ebb and Flow. What you want to do is use Ebb and Flow to harass or when 2 carries are facing each other. What happens is that you take a chunk of health from the enemy carry and give it to your ally or to yourself. It's pretty awesome, most people don't really expect it. Now about your Q, Aqua Prison, it's an excellent stun. The problem is actually landing it, however, since it's, a skill shot. In this part you see me using Aqua Prison and all of my other abilities on their cannon. Try to wait until the enemy champion commits to a fight and use their respective dash or escape abilities that they have before you try to stun them. That tends to work better. It does have a fairly long cooldown, so try to predict where the enemy champion is going to be standing, beforehand. Usually hiding in a bush or watching as the enemy tries to get a last hit on a minion tends to work best. As far as your ultimate tidal wave, make sure you wait for the right moment. It's not really that great at initiating because of how slow it travels. It tends to telegraph where it's going to hit exactly. It tends to work better if you wait until the enemies are committed to a fight before you use it. This allows you to apply its effect on as many enemies as possible and also apply your passive movement speed buff on as many allies as possible. In terms of items, you can go ahead and start your game by grabbing a Faerie charm as well as some sight or vision wards depending on what you need and some potions for sustain. Try to grab a Sightstone on your first trip back to base, which you will eventually turn into a Ruby Sightstone. I personally recommend, however, that before you do that, that you grab a gold item in the form of a Philosopher Stone if you feel that you're getting harassed too much, or a Kage's lucky pick if you are ahead and want to extend your lead while in lane. During the mid game, you want to make sure that your team has at least one Locket of the Iron Solari and an Aegis of the Legion, which can be made into a Runic Bulwark if the enemy has heavy magic damage. Sometimes junglers and bruisers like to get these items too, so communicate with your team before you buy them. If no one else is buying them, then you can go ahead and grab them for yourself. If you need some early boots, by all means go ahead and grab them, but Nami can always buff herself for extra movement speed, so I personally find that you don't need them until after later on when you complete all your core items. Upgrade them into Ionian boots with Lucidity ideally, or you can also grab Mercury threads or Ninja Tabi depending on the situation. At this point you can go ahead and grab whichever items you prefer. I personally really like the Morellonomicron, but there are other options. In teamfights, always kite and position yourself well, use your abilities, try to buff your AD carry and use your ultimate whenever the enemies commit to the teamfight. Try to disrupt their positioning while buffing all of your allies. After the teamfight, go ahead and heal and buff your allies if necessary. This is also good to know if you happen to be facing a Nami, her counters. The AD carries that counter Nami in lane will be champions like, for example, Ezreal, Tristana, Draven, all champions with high poke and damage early on. If you get caught by one of these champions or the enemy team, you are most likely going to die and in turn make the laning phase more difficult for your carry. Because of this, supports with high burst are also dangerous. This includes champions like Leona, Lulu, or Sona. Also watch out for supports with a grab ability that pulls you towards them, such as Blitzcrank or Thresh, because of the same reason. If you want to counter Nami, you can choose any of these champions if you're good with them. And with that, I think that about covers it. In conclusion, I feel that Nami is a different support from what you may be used to. If you haven't played support or aren't very good at it, I definitely recommend giving Nami a try, since she works very similar to an AD carry, also considering how strong she is in the current metagame. Go ahead and give her a try and let me know what you think in the comments. I did add a summarized version of everything Nami related that I've mentioned in the description, you know, for quick reference if you're interested. Please give me a like if you enjoyed this video, I hope it was useful to you. Please comment, let me know what you think, and also please subscribe if you would like to see more. Thank you for watching and enjoy.